Good evening. My name is Brian Barsana. I am Assistant Curator and Manager of Publications here at the Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles. And by here, I mean my office, but you know where here is. I want to welcome you all this evening to our third Uncommon Commons panel labeled Crisis State. I just want to thank some people before we get going. I want to thank, of course, Virtual MOCA is presented by the Thrive Fund, courtesy of Shara Schreier. I want to thank my colleague, Brian Dang, who is producing this event. I, of course, want to thank our panelists who are involved, and I'll introduce them shortly. And I also wanted to let the viewers know that, this is part of Virtual MOCA, which every week we have some sort of program that talks about either art or poetry or introduces us to artists. And we encourage you all to attend. You can find it at on our website, moca.org. Tune in next week on Thursday at 4 p.m. So this same time, there will be a conversation with the filmmaker Malena Salam, who's a Chilean filmmaker. She's part of our screen program with some amazing films that are up right now at our website. And that'll be a conversation between her and I at 4 p.m. on Thursday. Okay, so just to give you guys a little bit of background about what we're going to be speaking about today. I know some of you can see the flyer that we have up, but today's Uncommon Commons is really getting to the heart of the matter in a way. I think everyone who is viewing this panel is probably aware of the multiple crises that are affecting Los Angeles right now. And some of them are acute and some of them are chronic. I think that we've brought together a group of panelists who are really gonna give us some insights into how their organizations or they personally have been working towards improving or working to diminish these crises in some way. And the four crises, I'm just going to identify them, and there are many, many different crises. Let me just say, these are just the four that we're going to talk about today. Of course, COVID-19 pandemic that is still affecting us, racial justice and police brutality, homelessness and our unhoused neighbors, and mental health and well-being. So our four panelists today are going to talk to us about the ways that their organizations and public space, which is available to everyone, is responding to this. So I'm just going to read out their bios now, and then we're going to get into it, starting with Ann Lee. One second. Ann Young Lee has 20 years of experience managing large-scale humanitarian response and sustainable development programming across a variety of sectors, including emergency relief, community upgrading and infrastructure, livelihoods and economic growth, and local governance. Alongside Sean Penn in 2019, Lee co-founded CORE, an evolution of Penn's JMP HRO, an organization founded in 2010 geared towards reconstruction and relief efforts in Haiti, for which she has served as CEO since 2016. During her time with CORE, she has overseen the organization's successful transition into an international response and resilience building NGO, responding to crises in Puerto Rico, across the Caribbean, in Latin America, and the continental United States. Okay. Yasmin Monet Watkins is a poet, comedian, writer, actress, content creator, educator, and organizer. Touring her intimate yet political poetry from Obama's White House to Johannesburg and empowering students from Harvard to youth prisons, Watkins' body of work weaves art and activism, exploring the intersection of race, gender, sexuality, self-love, and all things Black girl magic. Watkins is represented by United Talent Agency and creates with her Black female comedy group Obama's Other Daughters. You can see their work on Comedy Central and on their new Shondaland podcast, You Down? Watkins serves as the co-chair of the Arts and Culture Committee for Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. Once Beyonce said she liked her hair. Okay, AP Diaz, Anthony Paul Diaz is the executive officer for the Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks. He is responsible for helping to manage and oversee all day-to-day operations of the department, including financial services, capital projects, special operations, recreation, maintenance, HR and risk reduction matters, governance, legal support, and policy matters related to the City Parks Commission, the City Council, the City's Attorney's Office, Mayor's Offices, and the LA Park Foundation. Jesus, I hope you're paid for all that work. Prior to assuming his current role, Diaz served as a general counsel for Recreation and Parks, helping guide the department on many high-profile and important endeavors, most notably the transformation, restoration, and management model for the historic and iconic Greek theater, which he oversees. And finally, Jonathan Pacheco Bell. Jonathan Pacheco Bell is a program manager at the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust, a nonprofit that develops parks and gardens through bottom-up organizing in LA's communities of color. In this capacity, he is responsible for building partnerships, facilitating community engagement, pipelining new projects, and co-managing the organization's park stewardship program. An urban planner by practice, Bell believes community-driven creation and stewardship of green open spaces can reverse inequities in park poor communities. So those were some, shorter bios, but I think that we're going to hear from each of them in their specialties. And again, I want to thank you all for joining and thank our panelists for being with us. We're going to go over straight to Annalie, who's going to tell us about core response.
Sure, thank you, and thanks for having me. I know I'm a little bit of an outlier, but it's really good to be with these folk and an actually super relevant topic as we're continuing to kind of search for locations and look at sort of how we're expanding. CORE is an organization, as you mentioned, that started in 2010 after the Haiti earthquake, and I've been living there for about 4 years when the earthquake hit. It was soon after that, and having worked there post earthquake, that I really fell in love with urban planning, because we did a lot of sort of neighborhood reconstruction, as well as urban planning post earthquake. The organization is really sort of focused on um, not just responding to disasters, but really filling the space of adaptability and nimbleness that often you have a difficulty in finding after a disaster, to be able to really sort of jump in and find where we fit and kind of can accelerate recovery, while also providing the immediate needs on the ground. We're a very community focused organization, which is funny because we partner right now with fire department. And so we're very much on the touchy feely side of like community and like, let's talk about it, versus the fire department, which is very command and control. But our organization as a whole, we don't have like a specific area of focus. We've done everything from shelter to debris removal. Now in this COVID space, we've really turned into sort of the testing space, and now into the vaccine space, working with our partners, local CBOs and sort of community leaders, as well as the fire department and the city, to provide these mass testing sites as well as these mass vaccination sites. That's us in a nutshell.
Do you want to share sort of the things that are happening at Dodger Stadium, or how that developed and all that?
I have a PowerPoint presentation. Is that the
Oh,
time
okay,
to do
yeah,
that now?
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sure. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay.
No, no.
Alrighty. Let me just share my screen. Alrighty. Can everyone see that? Great. Is that right?
View full screen.
View full screen. Oh, here. Sorry. Full screen mode. Perfect. Great. So this is a great photo of sort of the immensity of Dodger Stadium. Dodger Stadium is super iconic, and seeing it in this sea of cones and cars has always been, every day when I'm out here, it's always a bit of a shock, but it's quite impressive, the operations. I kind of went over quickly sort of who we are, so I'll just skip this slide real quick, but really want to start out with where we started, which is Lincoln Park. We knew that testing was always something that might not feel very comfortable. People are scared, they're not feeling well, and we really needed to find some place to kind of ensure that people felt comforted, and parks being what they are. Parks are created to kind of have the social mixing of different people, and provide such a positive outdoor space. You have the playgrounds, you have kids. And so Lincoln Park is still functional. We just occupy a part of it, but it's really that vibe that we really wanted to keep, to ensure that, it was something familiar for the community, which is in East LA, and you guys are all from LA, so I don't need to kind of explain the geography of it, but it is in a high COVID positive rated area with a high prevalence of COVID, but also it's a very Latinx neighborhood. So this was a critical area that we wanted to start out with. And again, focusing on a park and someplace that people were familiar with and felt safe at, where you still continue to have, you know, the outdoor space where people can go and walk and kind of have a regular park day was important to us. And it was this park that where we started our testing capacity of about 300, and now we're doing about 2,000 tests and also 1,500 vaccinations. Just to give you also just a clue of like sort of, you know, we've kind of carried this over to all of the cities where we're working in New Orleans and in Washington, D.C. We're choosing very iconic places, you know, whether it's a church, a cathedral, someplace very beautiful.
Hey, Anne, sorry to interrupt you. I think we're not seeing the slides change. It's just sort of stuck on the first one in the screen share.
Okay, good to know. Is that moving?
No.
Okay, hold on one second. Resume share. Let's stop sharing for a second. Okie dokie, let's give that another try. Sorry, y'all. How's that? Good? Okay, great.
Sorry, thanks.
No, thanks for catching that. Can you see this one? Great. So, you know, again, we're choosing very iconic spaces. So, you know, on the left, you're going to see one of the most beautiful churches in New Orleans, and in Washington, D.C., we're doing it outside. Again, the whole idea is to kind of elicit a sense of familiarity and a bit of normalcy, especially in the space where we know that, you know, it is kind of jarring. We're in this strange new world right now with COVID, but as much as possible to try to bring down the level of sort of discomfort and fear. And so one of our big things around this is to not only try to make it comforting and familiar, but also add in elements of things that kind of make it joyful. So at our Dodger Stadium, when we were doing the testing, I don't know, Brian, if you had experienced this, but we had bands come through. So we had music probably about 2 to 3 times a week that would play, and it was just phenomenal. You know, you're sitting in line, you know, you don't know if you're sick, you're kind of freaked out, and there's all these things going on, but to kind of, again, bring it down to some sense of familiarity, we made it a point to have music there. And it was so successful that we encouraged all of our mobile units and all of our other sites across the US to really kind of make it as an event, and rather than something that is heavy and scary, to include as many, you know, music components. We have DJs sometimes we try to partner with like a food organization that's providing, you know, free hot dogs during the day to do so. Again, not just to take advantage of a familiar space, but also create a sense of community and a sense of like, this is something positive that we're doing for each other, for ourselves, and for our family. Dodgers, having something at the Dodger Stadium for the vaccines, for example, is just incredible. Everyone who comes through there, and also even our staff who go through there, you know, there's that sense of like kind of like fighting spirit, especially since we won the World Series. It's just been, you know, when you're even working, you know, 12 to 15 hours a day in the line under the hot sun or rain, as it was on Saturday, you know, you have this sense of like enormity of where you are, and seeing like the lights light up. It's magical at nighttime because the lights are all, you know, kind of make it kind of eerie and beautiful at the same time. The enormity of the situation and what our teams are providing there, like it doesn't, you know, it doesn't go over their heads. They understand it, and being on that, you know, at the Dodger Stadium is really super. I guess it just gives us life when we're there. It also helps sometimes when the Dodgers come through and say hello. Again, you know, when we're looking at the mobile units, it's so important to go to the spaces where people feel comfortable. And we're really focusing in on this as we're rolling out the vaccines in other areas. You know, it's already difficult to kind of ask people who might not have smartphones, who might not have internet access, who might not be tech savvy, might not be getting information as much as, you know, we do as we're consuming, you know, consuming our information on the internet every given moment. So it's so important for us to kind of do the outreach and do the sort of localized hand holding around some of the communities that need it, undocumented communities, the elderly, you know, folks who need that added touch. And so being out there physically in a space that they recognize and that they are trust is super important. You know, it's hard as it is to sometimes have, you know, in all of our other cities, we don't necessarily partner with anyone with badges, which is very important because it really allows for people who don't feel safe and you know have discomfort, who might be undocumented or what have you. Really, it's that feeling of community and safety that we're constantly very conscious of creating. And space has and these public spaces have a very critical piece to play in that. This is just some of our team working. Let's see. And I think that's actually the last slide that we have. Really, in essence, you know, we've been able to kind of go from these highly trafficked areas of, you know, whether they're shopping malls, metro stations, grocery stores, plants and parks, and, you know, all these places has really allowed us to kind of borrow on the sense of familiarity. It's increased the level of trust in us and recognizability, I guess, for us. And for us, it's been a very conscious and deliberate effort to make sure that part and parcel of the space that we're creating and also using lends itself to sort of a sense of safety, community, responsibility to one another.
That's great. It's amazing work. I had the pleasure of volunteering for CORE earlier this year, very early on in the pandemic, and it was extremely fulfilling. And as you say, it's, you know, there wasn't a good sense of what we could do to help at this point, and they made me feel like we could help. I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about how the sites are transitioning into vaccination sites.
Sure. It's really, you know, essentially what we've been doing is we learned so much in the last 11 months in what works and what doesn't, and kind of hone this sense of space of like, okay, we can look at a space and say, this is how many bodies you can fit into it. A skill that I never thought that I would ever use, but it's really been actually quite easy in the sense that the logistical part of transitioning into a testing space into a vaccine space, the difficult part is and that's what we consider like the hardware, right? You move cones, you just rejigger the site, you kind of do the mapping spatial exercise of how people are kind of, you know, processing through the site itself. The difficult part has been actually the software piece, and that involves like sort of the human touch of it. You know, how do you get people comfortable to come to these sites as a vaccine site? A lot of people are excited, but there's a lot of people that are kind of reluctant, and we know that that's going to be a struggle moving forward as we open the tiers up. But it's also but it's on sort of getting the folk to the sites. We think that it might be difficult in certain community groups, but on our side, for our employees, it's been this resurgence of energy, and that transition has been almost like this new boost after 11 months of working so hard, seeing almost like this light at the end of the tunnel. And these our employees are wanting to work double shifts because, you know, they get so much satisfaction when folk come through the line thanking them for a vaccine, you know, that literally could be saving their lives. So I think, you know, transitioning from Dodgers, for example, we got a call on Saturday night from the mayor's office of, we got to do this. Can we do it by Friday? So we had less than 7 days to turn it around. And we said, yes, of course, we're all in. You know, our staff was completely just dug in deep again and jumped right in. I know that the fire department pulled, you know, 3 24-hour shifts just to get it done. And even after that, you know, we had heavy rains. We were still trying to figure out the system, because now it's not just us and the fire department. It's us, the fire department, and 4 other agencies that are providing clinicians. Then you have the software company who has a presence as well. So it's this massive exercise of kind of coordinating between all these entities. But so far, with a few kinks, and every day we're working out those kinks, it's this incredible dance that we have with each other, and we're trying to figure each other out. You have each other's, personalities. You have the LAFD, which is like very, a certain type, and then you have us touchy feely types that are nonprofit. Then you have the nursing students, and you have, it's been a really interesting dance amongst all of us that, we're still kind of figuring out. But at the end of the day, I think seeing the folks come through and people crying and, feeling that we are, and seeing the impact of what we're doing is what keeps us on site. So, at the 12-hour mark, when the nurses are leaving and they're like, we're done with our shifts, and we're asking our team, will you dig in and stay until the end, until we get every single person vaccinated? And they're all like, hell yeah, we're all in. It's that sense of duty and sense of sort of like, we're in this together. We're gonna beat this thing, that I feel like, kind of fits so perfectly with Dodgers, of like this like fighting, winning spirit that really sort of comes together quite beautifully.
Amazing. That's so great. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna move on to our next panelist, just so we have time for everyone. Yasmin, Monet, Watkins.
Thank you for sharing, Anne, and thank you, MOCA, for the invitation. Hello, everyone that's out there. My name is Yasmin Monet Watkins. I'm a poet, comedian, writer, organizer, and currently the co-chair for Arts and Culture Committee for Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. So what I'm sharing today is really from my perspective as an artist and an organizer. I'm going to highlight a few different campaigns, though there are many. We got a small amount of time, so want to highlight those. The Fire Beck campaign, the Jackie Lacy Must Go campaign, and the Black Women Are Divine campaign, to speak to the ways that BLMLA utilizes public space, or has used it over the years, as a community organizing space and site, and a call to end state-sanctioned violence against our people. So is that cool? Is that all right with y'all? Very much a performer and a poet. So like I said, honored to be here. But one thing that we do at the top of like every BLM thing that we do is acknowledge those who have come before, and whose names we struggle for justice. And the name that comes to me, and I'm going to share a poem that I wrote for one of the folks, but I remember meeting Waukesha Wilson's family through some of this organizing work, and hearing her story really moved me to continue to show up. And for those who are unfamiliar, Waukesha Wilson was like LA's Sandra Bland. She was killed inside LAPD Metro Detention Center actually, it'll be 5 years in March that she was killed. And of course, the police ruled themselves in conduct. So honoring Waukesha, this is Waukesha's poem. On the 1-year anniversary of yet another Black death, a Black woman is risen. In the voice of her people, she walks in our steps and lives in our movement. We say her name, Waukesha Wilson. We say her name, Waukesha Wilson, demanding justice now. Knowing Black death and cover-ups still sound the same across this country, from Sandra Bland to Emmett Till, today we lift her up and make her visible. On the day of yet another Black death behind bars, on the day that yet another Black woman's murder is deemed suicide, on the day the LAPD rules themselves in conduct, we grieve and cry and then dream, because sometimes the dreaming gives us clarity of visions to work towards in the waking. And in my dreams, I pray an alternate universe exists, and that somewhere on that timeline, a telephone rings and a mother picks up and passes the phone to her grandson, who says, "Come on home, mama." And she does. and she gets to wish her beloved aunt the happiest of birthdays, and she lives in this timeline. A mother does not sit by a phone and show up to court looking for a daughter that the police would never allow to return. Lord, let there be another universe without the cover-up, without the abuse, the murder, before the red, white, and blue lights signal and flash the end of yet another Black life. Lord, please let there be another timeline where the police who killed Waukesha are held accountable, where the LAPD no longer terrorize our community. God damn, please let there be an alternate universe. And in it, a timeline where a mother receives a phone call, and that phone call leads to a court date, and that court date leads to a fair process. And a mother drives her daughter back, and she goes home. And on this Resurrection Sunday, on this timeline, I pray somewhere a phone rings and a mother goes home to her son. And Black joy is synonymous with the reimagined justice. And instead of prison bars and over-policed states, the community is supported and healed and whole. And on this Resurrection Sunday, we celebrate a life that got to live to her fullest capacity. And on this timeline, the ancestors smile and say, well done. We'll see you in a good long while, but take your time, baby. Take your time. And we do. Thank you, thank you. I remember like what brought me to BLM. I joined back in 2016. It was shortly after hearing Philando Castile's of his murder by the police. And at the time I was doing poetry workshops with incarcerated youth, and I was hearing in their poems and their stories and the things that they were sharing, the ways in which the police would target them, over police their communities. And it's one thing to like learn about it in college and hear the world is fucked up for Black folks in theory, right? And then hearing it in practice and seeing it unfold daily from my students to also just what was happening in the world. And at the time, BLM was just starting a campaign in the name of Riddell Jones, another Black woman who was killed here in Los Angeles. And it was decolonized City Hall, LA City Hall. And so that encampment was there for 54 days. And as we're talking about public space, right? Like City Hall is the public space for Angelenos. And so staying there, there were there were food and snacks, and like we were sort of building the world that we wanted to live in, and really like uplifting Riddell Jones's name while also demanding that the mayor fire Charles Beck, who at the time was the police chief of the most murderous police force in the entire nation. That was right here in Los Angeles. And after after consistently showing up for 54 days, and then and it being a community effort, Charles Beck wound up stepping down. And for me, that was like a moment where I was like, oh, the work that we do, just regular people who give a damn, who want to impact state-sanctioned violence in some way, to see that our efforts, that our love, that our joy, that our sadness, that our grief, that our organizing meant something and changed things. And that was like one site I want to highlight as using public space in order to impact our daily lives. Another campaign, and I'm sure some of you guys know this, most recently, Jackie Lacy was our former district attorney here in Los Angeles. Under her tenure, over 600 people were killed by the police, and she prosecuted, I think, like one of the cops. And of course, Waukesha's story falls into this, and really seeing the ways that we're just like, you have the power to do something about this. And we tried to petition her and tried to involve her in the process. And at the point where it was clear that she was not going to do her job, it was, all right, every Wednesday, Jackie Lacy must go. Again, consistency, again, showing up, building the community. Did see like a huge spike this summer, obviously, but seeing Jackie Lacy be pushed out of office in as a result and as a victory of community organizing, particularly in a very public space outside of her job. It's like, and actually one thing that I'll share, I'm so excited to share this. So I'm a millennial, and so I'm gonna share through Instagram. Judge me not, folks. This is where I'm at. I know y'all are there too. How do I share this screen? Share screen out here sound like a sound like a grandma. Okay. So this was one of my introduction to BLM. You can kind of see this space taking over justice, that whole pathway, right? So being able to, all right, the poems. But I'm sharing here also, like, being at City Hall, particularly on that last day that we found out that Jackie Lacy was no longer going to be in office, to have shown up consistently over the years was just joyful. It's like, it's knowing that the work we do now matters and makes an impact. And then the last event that I'll share was an event called Black Women Are Divine. And we took over Norman O. Houston Park. A lot of the folks who come to BLM, it's a leader full movement, but a lot of women are behind the scenes. And this was a time and space of showing up to Norman O. Houston Park and inviting folks to share their stories and to share their gifts and honoring Black women in the name of Breonna Taylor. I'll show you a quick little recap of what it looked like. There was arts and crafts, hand massage, dance, sound baths, really, again, creating the world that we want. Really beautiful. There were flower crowns. It was a highlight for me. I'm going to stop the share, but these are sort of the three things that I wanted to highlight in terms of public space, right? Taking back our site, the idea that public spaces are necessary for protests. The revolution is not privatized. No one owns these spaces, right? Or should not own. We see the ways that gentrification has misplaced our people. And we reclaim this space as a revolutionary act. And as a way to respond to the crises in our communities, including the murder of our people by police, toppling systems that keep us oppressed, building new structures that offer spaces and sites for Black love. And this is my last little final piece. I know we're getting up on time. Brian's looking at me like, all right, girl, you did your thing, come on. But I joined BLM because it is a Black-led intersectional movement that is queer and trans affirming. As a bi Black woman, seeing the way that Black women are treated in this city, this allegedly progressive city, moved me to action. I love Dr. Melina Abdullah says and brings in, and it's a huge part of our movement, like it's a sacred duty, right? I'm an artist by trade. You see my PowerPoint skills ain't that popping. You know, I feel like Angela Davis says, do your work where you are, and this is where I am. And so I leave you guys with the question of how are you showing up for Black lives in the ways that are requested? The call from the community is to defund the police and to reimagine what public safety can look like, right? We can be in these public spaces and think about ways to be safe. I would never think about like, oh, let me camp out in front of City Hall and that'll be safe. But we reimagine taking care of each other so that we have investment in housing and education and healthcare and mental health care and good jobs and healthy food and public transport and small business support. Like, these are the things that the community is asking for. So our ask is to amplify, use your voice to amplify our work in protecting Black lives. Put your body on the line to show up for Black lives. Use your resources, your time, your body, your energy, whatever you can, bring it to the revolution. We will very much be out in public spaces, and you can find us there. And I look forward to the Q&A afterwards. So thank you.
Thanks, Yasmin. And thanks for I'm so happy you read a poem. I love when things begin with a poem. And thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for reminding us that the space outside of City Hall is a public space, and it's where we need to go to demand from our leaders. So, or those that we put in power. So thank you for reminding us.
Let's be clear.
Yeah, any public space, but that particular public space
until they're accountable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to AP Diaz. Thank you so much, Yasmin.
Hey, everyone. Well, what inspirational words from Yasmin. And I just love the work that you're doing, as well as Anne, who spoke before her, because it's really a privilege in my job to be a steward of public space, common space that is dedicated for people to do exactly what Yasmin was just talking about, as well as Anne, coming up with creative uses to serve the people better. And so I want to walk you through a journey of our public spaces in Los Angeles, your parks, and what that has looked like during this past year, and why it is now more than ever so important that we continue to amplify the need for public spaces, common spaces, open spaces, so that good work, whether it's vaccinations or the elevation of social justice causes, have a place to do that good work. So I am going to walk you through what your parks have looked like during this past year. So I titled this City in Crisis, The Therapeutic Benefits of Parks and Open Spaces, How Parks Can Heal and Shape the World in, through, and out of the pandemic. That's me in Griffith Park, your Griffith Park, the largest park in America, actually the largest urban park, 4,200 acres with the observatory as the crown jewel there on the mountain. If you haven't enjoyed that site, it's one of our city best, and we just absolutely love it, as I know you do as well. So I want to talk about the city parkland. When I say parkland, I'm talking about specific dedicated land, dedicated for the use of the people, for the people, and by the people. Our Department of Parks in the city of Los Angeles was included in the original freehold charter adopted in 1889. It was placed under the jurisdiction that parks and public sites would be set aside in perpetuity for use of the community. That means forever and forever and forever, as part of the original Spanish land grant. And it's really important to give significance and import to our indigenous people that occupied the land way before the Spanish came, and way before we incorporated as a city. Parks on this land are now called the Plaza, Pershing Square, and Elysian Park. Those were the first three public spaces in Los Angeles that started our great history and trajectory forward to now we have over 450 parks just in the city of Los Angeles alone. Their rights inviolate, right? Sometimes we use these Latin words, which I think are kind of cool and interesting, and maybe inspire Yasmin to use these in her poetry, because they have such significance and power. The charter includes a guarantee of perpetual public uses of land set aside as public parkland. What that means is that all land shall ever forever be dedicated for the use of the public inviolate, which means you cannot take it away. As I mentioned, Griffith Park, the largest urban park with over 4,200 acres, dedicated in the late 1800s by an English miner from the Welsh region. And he specifically said, I'm going to give you this land, city of Los Angeles, with the condition that it forever be a place of respite, rest, and relaxation for the masses. And if we do not do that, then the land goes away. So it's a duty that we have to carry out. So common spaces, common places. You know, parks are considered traditional public forums. They're protected. They're the town square, the street, or the area that allows people to exercise their First Amendment views and speeches, which we so cherish as Americans. Parks and public spaces must be equally aware and mindful to not use those public forums to exercise messages beyond the acceptable forms of government speech. So it's a two-way. It's saying we give you, the people, the right to exercise your First Amendment views, to do that responsibly, and to know that you have a place to do that. But we as the government, we have to be careful. We don't want to ever use our public space in a way that's treading upon people's rights or that's giving an inappropriate message, which many courts have ruled sometimes we go beyond the reach of what is acceptable. So we don't ever want to put a mark on a public space that says you're not welcome here or only this view is tolerated here, etc. That would be a violation of us using that public space. So 2020, I'm calling it the Great Pause. I think I've heard that someplace, so I don't want to coin it completely as mine, but I describe 2020 as the Great Pause. A myriad of challenges, right? A global pandemic, shelter in place order, park restrictions, social injustices, civil unrest. What more could we take on in this year that was supposed to be the launch of an amazing decade? When we all think back to 2019, December 31st, ready to launch off 2020, and boom, it slapped us back in the face starting in January. You know, COVID-19 has really quashed our daily practices and forced us to adapt to a world completely different than the one we knew a year ago. I believe now more than ever, parks need to amplify their reach to serve as healing spaces to transform a world hungry for peace, play, and wellness. So let's discuss this important role of parks, how they will heal the world, and how we can, together as citizens and park professionals and those interested in public spaces or urban planning, can really amplify the benefits and how we will get out of this great pause. This is just a snapshot of how we can never be too reliant on statistics. This was before the pandemic, and they ranked through the World Health Organization, gave every country a global health score, ranked the United States would be the #1, followed by other Western nations to deal with crises and pandemics. And we quickly saw that the graphic shows two different pandemics when you compare the European Union and the United States. We were not the #1 most prepared to deal with this. And sadly, we've seen our numbers continue to rise and give us that badge of being the country most afflicted with COVID, even among similar population numbers. So parks have been repurposed. Our traditional functions are on hold. For those of you who love LA parks, thank you for being with us on this journey. We feel your frustration. We know that you long to be out in recreation and nature. And when we had to close trails and beaches, it was very difficult to sustain, and we tried to do it in the least amount of time possible so that we could work to get those spaces reopened. But in the meantime, we've also been using our parks for a variety of uses that have proven to be so successful. When you have 450 parks in the city of Los Angeles, and people like CORE or Black Lives Matter or Union Rescue Mission or any other provider is hungry for space, you have a duty to give that space over because it is public space. So in Los Angeles, we closed all park amenities, meaning indoor, courts, stadiums, basketball and playground, with guidance from the Department of Public Health. And we transformed our spaces into 26 emergency homeless shelters. So if you remember, for several months, we were staffing recreation centers as homeless sites 24/7 with providers. We are now in the job of staffing 50 alternative learning sites. These are our daycare centers going on today while LAUSD remains closed. We know that our essential workers, that our single moms and dads need places for their kids who don't have the luxury of doing school from home, so they can come to one of our 50 sites for free around the city. We have 15 emergency first responder childcare centers. We have 550 isolation trailers that we use for people to have safe places to be quarantined if they were afflicted with COVID. And all of this now with the vaccine centers on the way that Anne was talking about, we're part of that effort as well with our various park sites. So it's just really interesting. This is what LA City workers look like. The people you see in the PPE, the full protective gear, these are your basketball coaches, your swim instructors, your day-to-day recreation operators. They're now serving the front lines as essential care workers, helping address people experiencing homelessness, helping roll out vaccines in centers, helping do testing. This is also a snapshot of how Los Angeles has looked during the past 10 months. I took this picture over LAX at 3 p.m. on a Friday. Those are our beaches, those are our piers, when nothing was going on really in our city. This is a photo of our iconic downtown Los Angeles. Again, this was just coming back from LAX in a helicopter, again around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday afternoon. When have we ever seen freeways like that? In the midst of what's been going on with the pandemic, we have to acknowledge and give action to the civil unrest that our society has gone under. Yasmine talked so much about Black Lives Matter, about the injustices that have occurred. These occurred in Los Angeles on great proportions. Certainly they occur all the time, but in 1968, we dealt with the LA riots in the wake of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King and other injustices at that time. In 1992, we were here again, a city in unrest after the beating of Rodney King. And we thought, could this ever happen again? And here we are in 2020 when we saw the injustices. And so we asked ourselves, will this end or will we be back at it, right? An unprecedented non-peaceful transition of presidential power is now added to this list of something we thought could never occur. These are some snapshots of what Los Angeles looked like during this past summer, some really powerful imagery of people exercising their rights on our public spaces, on our freeways, on our streets, on our overpasses, and really giving an amplification to what people were feeling. This was the downtown area during some of the BLM get-togethers in the middle of the pandemic, right? We're also experiencing this as a society, getting emergency alerts like we do Amber Alerts in the day telling us we're under curfew, we're under control, we have to shelter in place. If we go out beyond curfew, we'll be arrested. All of these scenes are just unimaginable, right? This is what Los Angeles, we are experiencing together as Angelenos, history in motion and really a need for change. Here's a picture of downtown Los Angeles in front of City Hall that we have been talking about. The coloring of this photo gave me the impression that it was like something from maybe the 1960s, right? Something that we would tell our children, oh, during the Watts riots, this is what Los Angeles looked like. And now we can tell our children and we can tell ourselves, no, this is 2020. This is military armed vehicles and military personnel in front of the people's house because, we're living in that kind of world right now. I like to give shots and props to our healthcare workers. To me, they're the true superheroes in all of this, the heroes and sheroes. And also this guy on Venice Beach in our park down there that I thought was great, was just serving the world, but need a little help, please. We all could use a little help to solve and deal with some of our problems. This messaging throughout LA, we've really been trying to relay positive messages of strength, unity, love, peace. And I love this one, the hashtag Stay Strong LA. So what's next for parks and open spaces? No one really knows, but we know one thing for sure. We're in a world in the need of healing. And I believe that parks, play, nature, recreation is going to be part of that. There's so many mental effects of COVID-19 closures that are going on. Some of you listening today can join me in saying, I've been lonely, I've been anxious, I've been stressful. It's a time of great personal loss. So are we losing our most enduring values, the ability to be creative and play together in public? I think the longer we go through the pandemic, the answer will be yes, but we, the people with vaccines and with safety and precautions, can transform scenes like this, skate parks filled in with sand, empty stadiums, closed beaches, closed golf courses and pools, right? We want to get to this, more reopenings and a safer LA so that you and I can continue to have some sanity, recreate, go to museums, go to day-to-day activities when it's safe. And we're getting there little by little. I'm going to end here with the silver linings because I believe that we have to find silver linings to stay sane. And that is that we need to invest in our civic infrastructure like parks, play structures, and trails, right? That's our legacy. To me, they're as important as bridges and highways, but they are part of the larger economic recovery because they will transform our health and wellness. And they are just as important as bridges and highways and police forces. We have to keep pushing that narrative together to our leader to say, invest in the people, invest in parks, invest in open spaces. That will be part of the transformation of any city who wants to get back together for good. So, you know, parks don't require memberships or special status, right? They're open to everybody from every different background, and they're essential to our democratic experience because we need those spaces to continue. So I believe parks make life better. I know you do too. And I just want to, you know, tell you to continue advocating for your parks because it is what is going to heal us and get us through this pandemic. I believe the best is yet to come. Like the citizens of Cape Town, Paris, and Rome, the people of LA, Chicago, and name any USA town long to return to normal, to feeling that sunlight on our face and that ground underneath our feet. So together, let's dream big. Let's come back stronger. We can do that. We are Los Angeles. We're resilient. We have so many diverse communities that are going to champion the best for Los Angeles and to be that model for the world. And that's why I love this great city. So let's come back stronger and better and dream bigger. And LA is a city that knows no boundaries. And I believe together we're going to continue to make it great. So let's come back to play. And I really look forward to those times and reunification in our public spaces. It will be a glorious time. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity to share what your LA City Parks have been doing in the past months. So thank you so much for that ability to do that.
Thanks, AP. It's great to hear what you guys have been, how you've been transitioning some of those recreation centers for housing and for learning centers. That's so essential. And I know there's so many parents out there who are dying to get some respite from their children, their lovely children. Okay, so we're gonna move to Jonathan now, who is from the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust.
Hi, everybody. All right, make sure I'm sharing my screen okay. All right. Thank you, AP, and to my fellow panelists and to MOCA, and of course to our audience members. I see you out there and I appreciate you being here. My name is Jonathan Pacheco Bell, Program Manager at the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust. We are a nonprofit community land trust formed in 2002 to address the critical lack of green space throughout communities of color in LA. Now, originally we began in the city of LA, but in the last 18 years, we have since expanded countywide. And in that time, we've developed 29 parks and gardens, adding 13 acres of green space to LA County and providing over 400,000 Angelinos park access within a 10-minute walk from home. Our mission is to contribute to the equity and well-being of our neighborhoods through the development of parks, gardens, and community-driven organizing. Neighborhood Land Trust develops green spaces only in LA's low-income communities of color. These are the communities that were historically impacted by redlining and histories of racist and classist urban planning policies. These are our community members. These are the people that we get up and fight for every day. We partner with these residents to reverse those inequities by providing access to nature, access to green space and shade and recreation and healthy food systems. And we do this so that the children you see here can inherit a sustainable future LA. I'd like to give everybody an overview of our unique community development model that engages residents every step of the way. It begins with authentic and consistent engagement, where we are on the ground in constant dialogue with our community members. That moves into organizing, done through our Park Equity Leadership Academy, where we actually train community members to be park activists and advocates in their neighborhoods. We're always looking to acquire parcels as a land trust so we can convert them into green spaces. We educate our residents how to look for vacant lots in their neighborhood and how to make referrals to us. Now, typically we're looking for vacant lots of about 12,000 square feet in historically disadvantaged communities and located in priority areas as identified by the LA County Parks Needs Assessment, and we'll see a map in a moment. After acquiring a parcel, we move into the participatory design process where our residents come together to do visioning as a community and tell us what they want and what they need in their parks. And when that's completed, the Neighborhood Land Trust plans and manages the construction. We learn from residents the programs that they desire, and when those parks open, we make sure that the programs are part of their new parks. And in our model, residents are trained as park stewards. Stewards open and close the parks. Stewards are the presence on the ground, that first point of contact. They provide that sort of eyes on the space. If there's anything that needs to be fixed, the park stewards will let us know. And they organize meetings for both the park and the community. They do so much. It's really a deep community connection between the neighborhood, the neighbors, the residents, and the parks. Now, I mentioned the LA County Parks Needs Assessment. I see in our panelists today that we do have some planners from LA County Parks and Rec Department. I want to say shout out to you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for all the work that you did for the Parks Needs Assessment. That was years long work, and that resulted in this park equity data that we need. So again, thank you. Here's a map showing areas with a very high park need as indicated in red and a high park need as indicated in orange. And you can see it's concentrated in central LA, in South Central LA, the East Side, San Fernando Valley, parts of the San Gabriel Valley. This encompasses about 50% of the county's population, a little bit over 50% of the county's population. You can see the high park need area. This is also where the Neighborhood Land Trust concentrates our work. We work in these very geographies. The systemic problem of park inequity has collided with the pandemic. On March 7th of last year, California had 19 new COVID cases. As of today, our state is looking at around 3.2 million COVID cases. The virus has devastated the communities that the Neighborhood Land Trust works in. I mean, think about it, loss of life, loss of jobs, the despair, all of it, all the stress and the lingering effects and the worry if you do recover. There's a lot. It's putting an incredible strain, and it's a difficult life event to surmount for many of our families. And all of this, of course, happened during the last year of just utter chaos and crisis. So, thinking about that and all the stress during what my colleague AP called this great pause, how have we been surviving? What have we been doing to get through this last incredibly stressful year? Well, one coping mechanism that we've seen is the increased use of parks and open spaces. All of our panelists have talked about that today. These are just three of the many headlines that you'll see if you start running searches for parks in the pandemic. Parks are playing an essential role in helping us get through this. So why are parks crucial public spaces in these traumatic times? If you read through all those articles, themes emerge, very familiar and consistent themes that actually underscore why the Neighborhood Land Trust was founded. So this next slide is going to be a lot of information. So I'm going to give you the gist of it. I mean, this is basically it. This is why we're here. Parks are community gathering spaces, free and open to all. that enable socially distanced exercise and play and access to nature, which has shown to create many positive health effects for residents and remediate and improve environmental conditions in our urbanized areas. Now that's a lot. So I'm gonna summarize it in one sentence. Parks are spaces of solidarity and healing. Ties into what AP was saying a moment ago. And we at the Neighborhood Land Trust think parks are essential infrastructure. And for that reason, our park creation work continues in this pandemic. Here is my colleague, Jose, and my colleague, Ashley, doing outreach recently at 11th Avenue Park in South Central. You can see that our work continues, just with face coverings and hand sanitizer and social distancing. But the pandemic has not stopped our work because parks are essential infrastructure. And I'd like to illustrate our work using the Neighborhood Land Trust's most recently opened site. It's called Golden Age Park. The site is located in the Westlake MacArthur Park area of LA, just south of and about halfway between MacArthur Park and Lafayette Park, the two large city parks in the neighborhood. This is a very low income area, very highly dense, built out with very few backyards and front yards for kids to play in. I'm going to show you what the site looked like. This was Golden Age Park for 30 years. This was the site, a vacant, sort of burnt out, abandoned lot that was trash strewn and a source of blight and nuisance. The Neighborhood Land Trust acquired this property through the county's tax default process. We started around 2014 doing community engagement. We organized several participatory design meetings where folks of all ages identified their priorities. Again, coming together, you tell us what you want in your park. What do you need? You tell us. So the exercises that we use include sketching and map exercises, an intergenerational activity survey, dotmocracy maps where you put a dot on the different amenities that are featured on a board, and ceramics workshops like the one you see here that included both seniors and young people. We opened Golden Age Park about a year ago, December 2019, 1 month before the first documented case of COVID in LA, and 3 months before LA County went on pretty much a lockdown order. And it was essentially just in time. We opened a park in this neighborhood just in time. Notice the tiles on the pillar. That is the artwork that was done by the community. I want to take a moment to uplift that, the community's tile art that greets you as you enter Golden Age Park. This was important. This was an important element that we made sure as an amenity so that the community could really see their ownership in just looking at the park as they enter. The tile work and the artwork reflects their artistic sensibilities and creations. Neighborhood Land Trust partnered with UCLA urban planning researchers who provided us design guidelines that helped us create, I believe this is the first intergenerational park in LA, meaning it was deliberately designed for different generations, seniors and young people and families, all the different folks in the area. But there's specific amenities tailored to the high senior population here. So as an example, the park has a flat walkway built with stumble-proof material. And that's to make sure that the seniors, they're not going to trip on this stumble-proof material. You can see also all the seating here. Golden Age Park has a path that's laid out intentionally in a circular design so that it wouldn't be too confusing for seniors who might be experiencing dementia. You could also start to see the layout and some of the amenities. There's a play area for children situated next to where seniors can enjoy them watching play without having to worry about balls flying and getting hit on the head and having other hazards and tripping threats nearby. And that's located next to a low impact exercise circuit that's designed deliberately and intentionally with stationary bikes and weight machines that can be easily operated by older folks. Golden Age Park also has a community garden. And this was, again, deliberately designed with raised garden beds so that seniors don't have to stoop so low when they're doing their garden. And there's so many other amenities. There's a variety of benches and seating options. There's a couple barbecue pits. There's a grassy area, a turf area. And this thing is, you know, a place that brings everybody together in the Westlake MacArthur Park neighborhood. It's a place for fresh air and nature access that was once a source of blight. And we're coming full circle. We're going to see what it looked like. I want everybody to remember, the site looked like this for 30 years. So this is where we started. Imagine living next to this for 30 years, a source of blight and dumping. We went from this, a space of nuisance and blight, to a space of solidarity and healing. This is Golden Age Park now. Golden Age Park has proven essential to the mental and physical wellness for everyone living in this neighborhood. I want to double down on this. I agree with AP. Parks are essential public health infrastructure, and we need to invest in our parks. We need to invest in them during this pandemic and certainly after, because they are public health core infrastructure. The Neighborhood Land Trust believes that those parks that we invest in, the new parks that we create, the parks that we renovate, it really must be community driven from the bottom up, and the parks should be stewarded by local residents. Neighborhood Land Trust wants to partner with you. So if you can think of vacant lots in your neighborhood or underutilized parcels or any areas in low-income communities of color that can be turned into green space, please reach out. And as I wrap this up, I want to say on behalf of all of our community members, all of our partners, all of our colleagues, everyone that's helping us advance park equity, thank you very much. And I look forward to our Q&A.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's so amazing. I think the idea of not only, of course, appropriating the empty parcels, but that it's a park tailored towards Golden Age residents, I think is incredible. I think so often we think of our parks as our places for children to play, but we don't realize that they're equally, if not more, useful to our seniors. So I'm so pleased to hear about that. I just, because we're sort of like reaching the end of the time, I just want to pose one question to all of us, and it's come up in a certain way in some of our presentations today about how we can help, but more than I'm thinking about, like, all these initiatives and all these things that we want to do with parks and to maintain these parks costs money, right? There's a huge expenditure here. And of course and I'm particularly interested in Ann Lee in terms of like funding for this, you know, these sort of sites and transitioning to vaccination sites. These are massive expenditures that are required. And I know that some of it's city, I mean, for maybe the Neighborhood Land Trust, it might be private. Like, can each of you in a short, like, sort of way say how your funding comes about and how that's maybe changed during the pandemic or something like that? Maybe Anne, you can start.
Sure, it's actually such a critical question right now. We've actually never gotten any government funding for any of our vaccine sites. Nope. And our testing sites. I know, it's insane. It's a mystery to me. We got very lucky with our donors. Jack Dorsey through Start Small gave us some funding to continue our testing operations. And then we went through sort of like an insurance billing process that helped cover our costs eventually. But the city was never able to cover our costs. They don't have a Department of Health. And so they don't get direct funding that comes through the CARES Act for all of this. And even our vaccination sites are not coming through any partnerships or any funding from the government. It gives us a degree of flexibility and a lot of autonomy, because we want to kind of remain very separate entities as well. But also, it's not super sustainable. So, eventually we are going to be needing some funding from whether it's our private sector donors or our, the CARES Act money that should be coming through to cover these very, very public service costs. I think you're on silent.
Yasmin, do you want to talk about how Black Lives Matter sort of gets funding for the events that you guys put together?
It's all people powered. No one's getting paid for this. We show up and do the work, and there are donations for everything. It's very much we take care of each other. It's We are holding and wanting to hold our government officials accountable, of course. But in the interim, it's us that are showing up to protect each other. And yeah, there's no donations. We're not even a nonprofit. We just want, to end state-sanctioned violence against Black folks. So all people powered, power to the people always. That's the answer to that.
Thanks, Yasmin. AP, do you want to talk about how maybe this funding for arts and recreation has changed during COVID, or?
Well, it's certainly going to be challenging because, the city as a whole is going to face a tremendous, deficit as we just slowly ramp up, getting all of our, revenue, traditional revenue, and getting businesses back in action. Trying to figure out how we're going to fill those gaps. So we're doing our best right now. That's why, sort of the gist of my presentation is one that we would make in front of our city council and our leaders, and encourage people to keep amplifying that voice. We have to continue that narrative that, don't pass up on parks during this time. It's really important to make those a priority. So I think the more that we keep them on that priority list and the relevancy high, which we're doing to support all of these activities, I'm confident that, our funding, although it's going to be less and going to take a while to come back, it's going to come back strong. And that's why the partnerships with Jonathan's group, the Neighborhood Land Trust and everybody together, we all come together in little ways to make our park better. And I'm also thankful for our LA Park Foundation, which raises money from private donors to support programs and activities and all kinds of things for kids and seniors and adults. And I agree with you, Brian. Seniors are really can value tremendously from parks. So look forward to continuing that work.
Thanks, AP. Jonathan?
Wait, really quickly, could I just, to that note, stressing the one thing that, as a tenet of BLM, in terms of when we say defund the police, the fact that there is no public funding, or the government isn't funding core, like Anne said, or the parks, these are things that the community needs, and so much of our city budget is going to the LAPD and to the police. Right. And so think about how much we could do in all of these sites. And I'm sure with Jonathan as well, with the land trust, imagine how much we could do if the funds from a fucked up institution went into things that we need. I just want to posit that out there. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
No, you're good.
That was an important point. I'm glad you made it, Yasmin. Thank you. On the topic of funding for neighborhood land trusts, we are a nonprofit community land trust, so we derive lots of our funding from city, state, county, federal resources, at the state level, Proposition 68, which funds parks, and so many other parks and open space funding. We're very grateful that that funding is still in place. And actually right now we're submitting, I believe we're submitting 4 projects for Prop 68 funding. So, our work continues. And we're very, very grateful to still have those funding sources. We also do a lot of fundraising, and, we're talking about fundraising at all scales. So it goes from individuals and mom and pop stores to, online businesses, to larger corporations, and on up to very large donors and foundations, very large foundations that fund our work. So we're always looking to create new partnerships and see where else our work can take us, as long as it's within our mission, bringing green spaces to LA's working class communities of color.
Great. Yeah, we have to piece it together. We do too. There's some really good questions coming in. I want to ask this one because, after all, I do work at a museum and this is a museum panel, and maybe Jonathan, you can respond to this, or maybe AP. How do you envision public art being a part of these spaces and efforts? Do you feel public art can open dialogue and expand thinking about how these spaces can be better shared and utilized?
For sure. I always like to say we have the real estate to host so many things, and I'm really a proponent of what we like to call art in the park. And that's really allowing, our public spaces to represent the communities in which they live in the neighborhoods. And when you place any small amount of art into a space, it transforms and enlivens that. So, some areas need to be, more of a natural habitat. But even in those spaces, you can do amazing things, whether it's a temporary installation or it's an exhibit. Some of you may remember in LA, a couple of years ago down at Pershing Square, we had something that became sort of a social media phenom, but there was an amazing structure that was placed over Pershing Square, and it illuminated light and it flew in the wind, and it was just such a great thing that brought the community together. So we're big proponents of public art in our parks and open spaces, because I really believe that they're powerful and they make our city better.
Thank you, AP. And from the neighborhood land trust perspective, public art is crucial to our spaces. So it's not just about exercise equipment and open turf. That's important, of course, but the parks and gardens that we create also reflect the communities that they're in. And public art is a wonderful way to reflect that. So you saw the tiles in Golden Age. I'd love to also uplift our Unidad Park in historic Filipino town. Unidad Park has, I believe, the largest mural created by a Filipino muralist in the United States. And that is in one of our park spaces. That's a crucially important element and feature and amenity of the park. So, we have the green elements, we have the exercise fitness equipment, and we also have public art that tells the story of the community, tells the story of the culture, tells the story of its history and its struggle. So in terms of the dialogue and expanding the thinking, absolutely yes. That's one of the features that we would always include, especially if it's demanded, like I said, with the community telling us what they want in their parks. We would definitely build that in.
All right, I'm just gonna, one more question, and sorry to put AP on the spot, but I do think this is an important point. I'm not gonna read the question a whole because it's quite large, but it's sort of about how can parks and recreation and parks encourage people who are using the park to use it properly during like a pandemic, to like make sure that they're wearing a mask or social distancing, because I know there are people that might feel uncomfortable using public space right now, because even though it's public and outside, they might come into contact with other people.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the challenge, right? It's even that way sometimes going to Trader Joe's or going to a pharmacy or going to your local, restaurant space, or even to pick up food. You see people, for the most part. And I got to say, a city of 4 million people, a county of 10 million people, I think we've done a good job of people being responsible, but certainly, there's more that can be done. And in public spaces, we really try to enforce the messaging that, it's important to mask up and to keep your space and to really use your parks responsibly. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge across all sectors, but we'll continue to promote it because we want people to feel comfortable in those spaces. But we recognize that, at the end of the day, it's really a collective responsibility. It's all of us doing our part to stay safe and to keep our fellow citizens safe until we can get these vaccines and we can get, that time when we don't have to do it. But I think we're in it. We're in it for a little bit more time. So keep those masks handy, because that's the key to using your public spaces.
Right. All right, everyone. I just want to say thank you one more time to our panelists, Jonathan Pacheco Bell, AP Diaz, Yasmin Monet Watkins, and Ann Lee. Thank you so much, you guys. This was an amazing panel. Thank you to our viewers for showing up. You guys, we've had really great and amazing questions, comments during all of this series. So I'm so thankful to you guys, the viewers as well, who've been showing up to these panels. Just another plug one more time. Next week, we have a talk with Milena Salam, the Chilean filmmaker, and tune in for more virtual MOCA programming. as we hopefully work towards opening up the museum and you can see art in real life at some point this year.
Hopefully
Hopefully.
we get to see some
Oh
black
my
art
God.
shoes.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
putting it out there, Mocha. I'm asking you too. How are you showing up for Black Lives, Mocha?
We hear
What-
you. We hear you. We
I
hear you.
appreciate it.
Call
There's-
us out, please, everyone. All right. Thank you guys. Have a good night, weekend. Stay safe. Wear a mask. Wash your hands. All that stuff. Thank you again. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.